What is Dharma? Simply put, Dharma is service. Dharma is duty. Dharma is duty. Dharma is what we do. Dharma is action aligned with the highest. Dharma is action which is so beautifully expressive of what needs to be done at any given point, that action does not create any negative effects in the environment. And we talked about Dharma being like cosmic, collective, and individual, but also karma can be negative, positive, or neutral. So dharmic action creates only positive effect. Only positive effect. So we can think of Dharma as that which we are designed to do. That's that which we are meant to do. As I'm saying that, I'm looking at Dharma and I feel like awareness is following it back to its roots. It's following it back to its roots. And there's this incredible stability, integration, and strength in Dharma. And I'm seeing also how it like diversifies when it comes out to the relative level of creation. And I think as long as we're talking definitions of Dharma, even though I've talked about this a little bit before, it will be good for new people just to review quickly. And that is that in Vedic terminology, Dharma is seen as an animate form of a bull with 4 legs. And the 4 legs represent these 4 stable forms that are like the foundation of Dharma: truth, austerity, purity, and compassion. The thing about these 4 legs of Dharma is that you need to be able to put your weight on a leg and it has to not break. But in the time period that we're in right now, and I did want to weave this in because it's another one of the downloads that's been coming to me over the last couple of weeks. In the time period that we're currently in, Kali Yuga, 3 of the legs are broken. So only the leg of truth is standing solid, which means in the way the laws of nature function in this space, in this reality that we're in right now, we can use truth in almost any challenging situation. I would say in any challenging situation, truth can be utilized to uplift that situation. However, the other 3 legs, one has to use discrimination, one has to use truth. Okay, so suppose you have a bull with 4 legs and 3 of them are broken. Then this leg has to be a splint for the other 3, right? If you can lean the weight on the leg of truth, then the leg of truth has to somehow interface with the other 3 legs in order to promote the ability to use those 3 legs at all. So in all 3 of the other of these aspects, let's see, compassion, purity, and austerity, it's possible, if one doesn't include discrimination and careful assessment of action, that one can overdo it. You can be too compassionate. You can be too obsessively, compulsively clean. You can be too austere to the point of like self-sacrifice. So it's important to be able to define where exactly is that line where I'm giving enough, I'm giving enough, say, compassion. I'm giving enough support to my friend or my family member that they have what they need in order to evolve as effectively as possible, but I'm not stepping across the line where I start enabling them to actually be weak, right? You want to, when you're being compassionate with somebody and you're giving of yourself to them, you want enough to be able to nurture and nourish that individual or group in a way that they get all the resources, they have that confidence, they have the resources to move forward with grace, but not so much. We don't want to make people weak by taking on their stuff and then making ourselves weak by taking on too much of other people's stuff, right? So there has to be a balance. And when I look at like that particular one, that particular example, the balance right there is provided by the source of creation. Because when, and I'm just using this as an example right now, but it's good to have a kind of concrete, because the whole topic of Dharma is like so abstract, right? So it's good to have this concrete example for a minute, that when the individual, if you're helping someone with your compassion, who is doing what to whom? The answer is that divinity is self-interacting at every point in creation. And that's the real truth. That's the deep truth, is that, oh, I may think like, I may feel like, oh yes, I'm going and I'm taking food over to the Lord's cupboard to be passed out to poor people, or I'm whatever I'm doing to help someone. But the minute that sort of individual sense of self and that separate identity starts playing in, then it's really easy to make a mistake. So if we're helping, and you can imagine in my work, I help people, right? There's a sort of relationship. There's a helper relationship here. And so what I found was that the individual remains safe and stable as long as the intention comes from being. As long as there's no sense of, oh yes, haha, my small individual ego self, I help that person. No, being is self-interacting. Being created that situation for them where they were suffering because they needed to bring more perfection into some area of their life. And what being did through this instrument was it shined the light of awareness right there on that spot so that they can see what's going on. And as soon as you see what's going on, it's almost a kind of a spontaneous reaction to take the next step to amend the problem. The reason sufferings arise is because we don't know what's the actual seed or root of that suffering. And until awareness has shined its light in on the seed of it, the suffering tends to continue. So in this case, what we're doing, back to our theme today, is what we want to do is we really want to establish that for everybody, for all of us and for everybody who will watch this video for all times in the future, to establish the ability to be so aligned with Dharma, with such perfection, that all the actions utilize the 4 legs of Dharma in their full potential. Whatever their potential is in this time of creation, that we're using compassion intelligently, so we help others, but we don't enable them. And we're using purity, intelligently. We're using austerity intelligently. So awareness is deep now into the seed or the source of Dharma, into the heart of the bull of Dharma. And the first thing that I'm noticing is it's like our whole, did anybody ever watch The Magic School Bus? I have children. So back in the day, the teacher gets all the kids on the Magic School Bus, and the Magic School Bus can go places regular school buses can't go. I feel like that's us right now. I miss Frizzle. Oh, she had frizzy hair like me too, anyway. So it's like our collective has sort of settled down into this sort of core construct of Dharma. And I'm just looking around. That's what they do on the Magic School Bus. They like go inside the circulatory system, and explore what's going on in there. And you just look around like, what is going on? And okay, I'm seeing like a whole bunch of different things. Here's the read. So the first thing I noticed was that integration and stability, that we've been working with that energy all along. The second thing I noticed was a connection to all the laws of nature and the laws as established, the established laws. And that means those, but not just the laws themselves as like individual laws, but more like the originator of the laws, Manu. Manu, there's a relationship between Manu and the bull of Dharma. There's like a guide, you could say a guide for the bull of Dharma. And that's the initiator or the creator of the laws. So everybody's receiving a download now for this, the creator of the laws, and a connection between the home or the source of the laws of nature and right into the heart. And as a collective, I'm feeling us in the heart of Dharma, but I'm also experiencing that the heart of Dharma has a correlation with our literal heart areas of our bodies. That big central Hriddya Mahamarma area, that big energy field of the heart area it's like a, creation is made like that in a kind of fractal structure, so that the larger forms nestle, the nestled realities, again, they're all nestled together. So there's some kind of connection being made between the devotion in the heart of Dharma to this source of all the laws with an upgrade or an increased intelligence in our heart areas to recognize, understand, perceive, increasing sensitivity, increasing heart sensitivity to those structures that are responsible for the laws. And for us as individuals, it seems that what we're getting is a little bit more specified information than is taking place in the heart of the bull of Dharma. In the heart of the bull of Dharma, it's like, it almost kind of reminds me of some kind of luscious love affair or something, some kind of luscious, deep, intense, outside the range of what we think of as human experiences. But there's a kind of a deep connection between the original laws, the giver, the creator of the laws of nature, and the bull of Dharma. It's such an integration. I'm having, you can tell I'm having a little trouble finding just the right words for it. But I can find pretty good words for how it's structuring in our physiologies. And that is a very clear, beautiful, concise alignment of understanding with the principle of the laws. And this piece of information really wants to come out right now. And that is that around the entanglements of karma, around the seeds of suffering, there's this tendency for, if we think of the suffering, the seeds of suffering like a seed, around it there tends to accumulate like a shell of intense emotions. And I realize this is one reason why people sometimes have difficulty when they're having a problem on the surface or a concern, of actually like digging down and getting into the seed of that concern. It's because it's like camouflaged in a way, often by these rather intense feelings or emotions. And Dharma indicates that whatever one is feeling emotionally, there's still a course of action which will promote success. And so it's almost always more useful to to align awareness with the behavior, the action, which will be life supporting, rather than letting oneself be gripped and swayed or be kind of carried away by the emotional element. It's important to know, this is really important, everybody. You have to understand when you're facing an emotional structure, something inside yourself that's really, really uncomfortable, it's not completely dense. Inside that feeling is the seed of the discord. And so if you can sort of move past, if you can transcend through or navigate, there we go, navigate through that hard hull or that hard shell of the discordant feelings that tend to cluster around the seeds, these entanglements of karma, then which form the seeds of suffering, right? Okay, so if you can navigate through that, you can get into the entanglement. And then from there, it's possible to start to unweave the entanglement of karma, to address each thread. Sometimes it can be tedious, but it's always extremely interesting and rewarding. Because if you can pick out even one thread from that entanglement and bring it to a place of resolution, then that entanglement becomes a little bit smaller. So the ability to act with steadiness and reason and logic and a sense of purpose and highest intention for everyone's best outcome needs to be more stable than the impulse to react to the emotions. As soon as, if you're approaching an entanglement of karma and you hit that wall of emotions, if an individual lets themselves start to become reactive to the emotions, what happens is it catapults awareness away from that seed, and then you have to start all over digging your way back in again. So I'm describing it to you so that you are forewarned. Forewarned is forearmed. That when these dense packages of emotional information are perceived, then that's the sign that you're coming up to a seed of karma. And so if we understand that our Dharma, our collective Dharma, there's a Dharma for our webinar collective. The Dharma of our webinar collective is to move like a ninja, is to be able to move like a ninja into some of these spaces which have the denser entanglements, and to be able to bring resolution to every thread with grace. And I don't know anybody who's done that before. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody doing it. I mean, it's something new. It's one of the reasons I love our webinars. So the question that came up is like, how do you actually navigate through this thing? So what we're doing is, as a collective, and I'm just holding the space in my awareness for our collective, we're looking at Dharma. That's our theme for today, right? And what we're looking at is anything that blocks our flow as a collective, our ability as individuals and as a collective to manifest our true Dharma, the most fundamental form of Dharma, the most perfect Dharma within ourselves. And one of the things I'm seeing are some of the life challenges that we set up for ourselves before we came into this lifetime. Temptations, attachments to life being a certain way, expectations from previous generations, expectations will cause a person to go in a certain direction that maybe wasn't their true direction, and above all, ignorance. Above all, ignorance. Ignorance. Now we got to the core of it. So what did we do? We started looking at Dharma, and then with our awareness, we kind of dig through into what is the seed, you know, how can we sum up that thing up? Ignorance is a pathetic thing. Everybody's got a few blind spots somewhere. So those blind spots, and the blind spots are administrated by through a kind of organized structure in the web of life, which benefits, you could say, which leverages our inability to see the whole story, to have a complete picture, and is able to that structure in the web of life, it promotes threads where there's lack of flow. So in the web of life, it's a big matrix of life force and consciousness, but there's kind of like a positive side of it and a negative side of it, if that makes sense. So there's also a kind of a web in the web that doesn't have flow, that doesn't allow flow of consciousness. Like one friend described it as a web of deception that overlays over top of the web of life. And it allows people to make mistakes. It creates a foundation or some scaffolding that supports the ability for problems to crop up. I'm just seeing so much, I kind of don't know how to say it all right now. But what we're going to do is, that's what we're looking at. I'm just going to call it the web of deception, but I just described it, right? So you all know what that is. It's like a system or a form, astral form, that's got that ability to block the flow of consciousness, to block expansion of consciousness. And underneath it, I'm looking for its seed. We're going to always go to the seed when we do energy healing, right? And underneath that, the illusion of separation. A lot of our work comes back to the illusion of separation, right? And without it, maybe the relative couldn't have been formed. So maybe it's necessary in order for there to be a relative level of creation. But it's also possible, anything you can imagine is, if you can picture it, it's possible for there to be so much integration that we can actually have the breaking of the symmetry of the unified field, and at the same time, absolutely complete and total integration of that source, that unified field source of creation, in every single diversified expression of its own breaking. Both are possible. Both are possible. So we're just going to offer that vision of the separation necessary to create diversification. It's green here and it's pink there and it's gray there and it's black and white and so forth. All the diversified forms, and then completely, totally integrated. Which is interesting as we're coming toward the end of our webinar. That's where we started, isn't it? It's interesting, we've come full circle. This whole webinar started with a big wave of integration, as I recall. So the integration is part of the navigational structure. It brings all the pieces together. They're all those threads that bounce or reflect through the web of life to each one of us, and are responsible for those blind spots. And here's the beauty of it. As our collective is working with these threads of consciousness, there's this element of reverence and tenderness and gratitude and care, discrimination, that discrimination. So we're standing on the leg of truth, right? So that we're discriminating very, very carefully as we're moving. Our collective is moving through this, what did I call, web of deception, to uplift every single thread, every single dark thread that blocks the flow of consciousness. Every single one is uplifted. It's infused with light. It's infused with the light of being, of divine being. Because we each one of us is an antenna to divine being, right? So we're all we can only do that. I see why we're doing this as a collective, you guys, because each one of us draws forth the qualities of divine being in a slightly different way, from a slightly different angle. And the thing about this structure that's in the web of life that blocks the flow of consciousness is that each one of these little dark threads, if we want to call them dark threads, requires a different angle or flavor or quality of the light of being in order to be like woken up, to be awakened, to be infused with an integrated being, to integrate with being, divine being, so that this structure, which has been responsible for a lot of suffering and a lot of problems, is resolved through an act of loving, compassionate application of truth. The light of being is truth. It's kind of like the bull in the china shop, only this time now we realize we're working with a very sophisticated bull who knows how to tiptoe delicately through even the tiniest threads, down to the tiniest threads. So I'm seeing this effect that our collective created. Now remember, when we create an effect, it goes out into the creation, right? And it bounces off the first layer and then it comes back and it bounces off the second. And what I see it doing is it's moving into a finer strata of our creation. So it's bouncing off of for example, the microbial level of the reality. And it's supporting the health and well-being of the microbiome, among other things. Nice job, everybody. Big upgrade for everyone's digestion. Thank you all for that. So that we become kind of living, breathing manifestations of optimal digestion, optimal relationship between the individual and their microbiome. Good stuff.